All right. Hi, folks, and welcome to the first ever joint town hall hosted by Pluribus News and State Affairs. This is our focus on energy, affordability, and meeting demand. I'm Reed Wilson, the founder and editor of Pluribus News, and I'm thrilled to introduce longtime readers of Pluribus News to our new teammates at State Affairs. State Affairs is bringing together the most prominent political newsrooms in the country to cover state level policy on the ground from inside the Capitol buildings from coast to coast. Our mission is to bring objective, nonpartisan coverage of what's happening in all 50 states to lawmakers, policy leaders, and to the general public. We're tackling a big topic today. Energy is a dominant focus of lawmakers across the country. Do we have enough? Where will the new capacity come from? How do we meet existing climate goals? And what do we do with all these data centers? Those are the big questions that legislatures are dealing with today. We've written a ton about the legislative landscape around energy this year, and you can find all of those stories in the link in the chat. And we've got some great panelists to help us dive in. The first two I'll introduce, and we'll introduce the rest of them as they show up. But first, I'm happy to introduce Washington Representative Beth Dolio. Representative Dolio is in her fourth term in the legislature and her second term as chair of the House Environment and Energy Committee. And we have Indiana Senator Eric Cook, who chairs the Senate Utilities Committee, very relevant to our conversation today. He's a member of the National Conference of State Legislatures Energy Supply Task Force. A little later, we'll be joined by Ohio Representative Roy Klopfenstein. He's the vice chair of the House Energy Committee, and by Virginia Delegate Josh Thomas, who serves on the Transportation Committee and the Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation, which, if you can believe it, also has to do a lot with energy. So a big welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for being here. And I want to add that we'll be bringing in our audience too. If anybody has any questions for our lawmakers, please drop those in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the conversation. But for now, let's kick off the conversation. I'll turn this over to my colleague, Pluribus News reporter Humberto Sanchez, who anchors our energy coverage. So Humberto, take it away.
Thanks, Reed. Welcome, lawmakers. Thanks so much for joining us. Representative Dolio, I want to start with you. You sponsored one of the most watched bills this year to try to regulate data centers. The bill died, but you plan to try again next year. Why do you want to regulate data centers, and what impact are they having in Washington State?
Yeah. Well, we have a number of data centers, and we're, of course, home to Microsoft, Amazon, and Saby. Saby is more of a warehouse data center company. And we have very strong clean energy and climate goals in our state. And when those laws were put into place, the projections of the amount of energy that we would need were really, we didn't know the data centers were going to be, hyperscaling and really putting a lot of strain on our energy resources and our grid. And so I think it's important that we have statewide standards around bringing data centers in. We have tax incentives. They get a full sales tax incentive, some of which went away this year, not due to my bills, but we have been citing and permitting a number of new data centers, but we are out of energy. We really can't do that. So really wanting to have some transparency about the water that they're using, the energy that was part of the bill. Also asking them to be more flexible with their load, making sure that there's investing in demand response programs so that we don't need to build up to that peakiest of the peak, right? We also were requiring that a tariff be put in place in any public utility district or an investor-owned utility that would make sure that there was no cost shift, so that they're picking up the full cost of any substations, transmission lines, new infrastructure that needs to be built, and then for the energy that they're going out to, so to make sure that we protect our utility ratepayers, our residential and small businesses as well. So that's what the bill would have done. It's very important from our perspective to make sure that we are addressing this as these data centers continue to site and locate in Washington State.
Thank you. Just to follow up, are you concerned that your bill would push large data centers and associated jobs and tax revenue to other states? That's among the arguments that the industry has made against more regulations.
Right. Well, as you know, data centers are a large provider of construction and building trades jobs, and it's also been a lot of rural revitalization, particularly in the city of Quincy. We call it the Quincy Miracle. Quincy has new high schools, new roads. It's pretty amazing, actually, what's happened in Quincy. And so the goal of the bill is not to drive data centers out of our state. The goal of the bill is to make sure that we're planning and thinking and making sure that we're not shifting costs of these, billion-dollar companies onto ratepayers. So I think we can do both. I think we can have data centers, and I think we can protect our ratepayers and our environment at the same time. But I do think that we need to have some policies in place to make sure that we are doing both of those things at the same time.
Gotcha. Senator Cook, I want to turn to you. Uh, let's see here. You have been a longtime champion for nuclear energy in Indiana, and you helped enact legislation last year to establish a regulatory framework for nuclear energy. The measures also included incentives, including tax credits for building small modular reactors in Indiana. I think Indiana was the first state to do that. Nuclear takes such a long time to build. Nothing's going to be online for a while, for a few years. What's the benefit of starting a nuclear framework now?
Yeah, and we're very fortunate here in Indiana to have Purdue University, which academically is one of our leading institutions. We're also home to at least two companies that are already active in the nuclear space. We don't generate nuclear energy here. We use a bunch of it coming from Michigan through Indiana, and Michigan Electric serves many, many Hoosiers. Um, we made a policy choice, as you noted last year, to pass several interrelated comprehensive bills as we move in this transition from coal to the future. And this was a key part of it. So last year we addressed siting with SMRs, we addressed financing, we addressed risk through de-risking, and then as you noted, we set up a tax credit for a company that would come here and actually manufacture them. And those all work in harmony together. Let me just single out the siting bill, which was Senate Enrolled Act 425. We created what we've called energy production zones. And that means that if there is a property where energy has or is being produced or is a coal mine, that is eligible for siting of SMRs without another level of local approval. And the theory being it's producing energy now, it has produced energy. You have a site that's site ready, you have an interconnection, you have a local economy that's highly dependent upon that for tax base and for jobs. And so there are about 40 such sites around the state that would be eligible for that designation. On the financing side, last year we approved QIP for pre-construction costs. Essentially, those development costs that come early on would be eligible for QIP. And finally, through Senate Enrolled Act 423, we allowed for partnerships. And those would be among 10 or so what we called eligible entities. So they could be utilities, they can be SMR manufacturers, they can be the military, they can be a university such as Purdue, they could be venture capital, or any combination thereof that could come together and build SMRs. And so that, in a sense, would de-risk. Each partner would bring something, whether it's capital, whether it's expertise, whether it's customers or a large customer would be an eligible entity. So we have allowed for some creativity and some flexibility, and in doing so, de-risk that investment. And then finally, we're hopeful with that tax credit, that 20% tax credit, that those SMRs that we would use here, we would build here in Indiana.
Yeah, that's a big 360 attempt to get that to ramp that industry up there. That's impressive. Um, so nuclear power is it's expensive. How does that fit in with the affordability issue that states are dealing with right now? Senator Cook.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure
Sorry,
who were directing
sorry
that
about
back
that.
to. Well, as I said, we already use nuclear power or coming from Michigan. Like everybody else, we are going through this energy transition. We have established by statute five pillars that govern our energy policy: affordability, reliability, resiliency, stability, and sustainability. And in statute, we recognize you can't touch one without touching another. And so we've pursued an all of the above energy strategy, and this would be consistent with those five pillars.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Uh, Delegate Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to see you here. Um, I wanted to ask, Northern Virginia is ground zero for data centers with the most anywhere in the world. Tell us about your district and the data centers showing up around your constituents. What are the centers doing to their lives?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you for having me. I live just south of what's termed Data Center Alley. So that's in Loudoun County, Virginia. I believe they currently have 600 data centers in just that one county. That said, we've kind of stopped using data center number as a metric because it's not really helpful now that we've gone to hyperscale data centers. Give you an idea of how big a hyperscale data center is, I have 3 under construction at one campus in my district. Each building is 2 football fields long. So Dallas Cowboys Stadium would be the same length as several, and there are 3 in a row. That's just one campus. There's a current campus that before Project Stargate down in Texas, this was initially started 3 years ago before the current administration. It would have been the largest facility or campus east of the Mississippi, requiring a gigawatt of power and consisting of 37 hyperscale data centers. To give you context for a gigawatt of power, Virginia has 2 nuclear power plants. One, our North Anna plant, contains 2 nuclear reactors at the same site. Both reactors would be required to power this one campus, which isn't even constructed yet. And we are not building any more North Annas at the moment, as my colleagues here from other states can attest, the long road to completion for an SMR. So what does that district look like? So we are, if Loudoun County is currently Data Center Alley, we are trying to be Data Center Street. And what I mean by that is Loudoun County currently has around 33 million square feet. So that's the new metric we came up with instead of number of data centers, is how many square feet of space are in them. So multiple stories, how many chips can you actually put in there? So they have about 33 million square feet of space. Prince William County, which is where I represent, just the south of Loudoun, is trying to rapidly catch up, which has created some problems. And we are currently at about 28 million square feet. Now, Loudoun plans to reach saturation, where they don't want to build any more data centers, around 40 million square feet, according to what they've said publicly as of late. If you were to count everything Prince William has greenlit or is in the pipeline or under construction, we would get close to 80 million square feet. For context, that would be 2 central parks next to each other by square feet. So absolutely gargantuan. No way to power it. So that's a really big deal at the state level right now. You just saw that in our legislative session that just wrapped up. Gigawatts and gigawatts of power. We would need thousands and thousands of acres of solar, several SMRs, and all of these are coming online in the next, not the generation, but the data centers themselves, the demand is coming online in the next 7 years. One of the results of that is Virginia currently imports the most power of any state. 39% of our power is imported, according to Bloomberg. And so we are very much stressing the PJM consortium, which is our regional power consortium. So my district struggles with 3 buckets, I would call. Bucket number 1 is siting. Where are we going to put these? They are everywhere. That has created some growing pains. Bucket number 2, how are we going to generate it? Maybe not in my community, but other communities have to deal with the generation and then the transmission, which can sacrifice farmland and other uses to get the power there. And then finally, the third bucket, I think some of my colleagues already discussed, which is who's going to pay for that? The ratepayer protections, which of course is a point of concern here in Virginia as well.
That's huge. That's a lot of questions there. So you have a bill that's on the governor's desk now. It would require large energy users like data centers to assess the noise levels in order to get a permit. Could you talk about that bill, I guess, and how it will help your constituents improve their lives who live so closely to these massive things?
Right. Well, as I think all my legislative colleagues on the call can attest, it's not the bill I started with, but you have to make compromise somewhere. Hey, undoubtedly, if you're a locality, you are getting the best bang for your buck for tax revenue. I mean, there's no more efficient way for a locality in America to generate tax revenue than with a data center because there's no schools that need to be constructed, there's no new homes that need to be constructed, and you don't pay for the power, and so that's a state problem, right? So for localities, it's a great deal. So there's definitely an incentive there. So what this bill did is not to take away a locality's ability to say yes or no, because it's very contentious, and I think in every state. All it did is say if you're going to make that decision locality, you need to look at a couple things. It's mandatory. You will look at sound studies if it's within a certain distance of residential homes. The other thing that you'll look at is the location of the energy infrastructure, which I think is something localities weren't necessarily thinking about, but their constituents have learned the hard way that it's very important. I mean, we have counties in Virginia that are getting no tax revenue because there's no data center there, but all the power lines are going through their locality, and so all they get are takings. And so, yeah, people are getting compensated, but the power lines are there, and the problems that those present are there. I mean, we're talking, the big 500 ones and even 700s, depending on how close they are to the backbone of the energy grid. So that was the mandatory piece. What we found on the permissive side, which those familiar with local land use law will understand why this is important, is to permit localities to also, when they make these land use decisions, consider other factors. Because if they consider factors that they can't legally consider, they could get sued and their decision could be overturned. And so what we permitted them to also consider are things like impact on water, forestry, historical areas. So, for example, the Manassas battlefield is right next to that large data center campus in my district I mentioned earlier. And so I think, well, at the end of the day, increased transparency is the overall goal of the legislation. And I think those who have constituents that struggle with this issue, like I do, transparency and lack thereof seems to be the biggest issue. And the last thing I'll say is the bill I would have loved to have had is just, and this is my recommendation to anyone who has a locality that's getting interested in attracting data centers to your area, you can head off so many of the siting decisions bucket if you just go ahead and say data centers are industrial buildings that must be in industrial zoned areas. Transparency becomes much less of an issue. The siting decisions become less critical, and it really just makes things a lot more seamless. But that would have been my number one recommendation. That's not in the bill for anyone considering getting more involved.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
Berto, could I just follow up on those
Please do.
points made from Virginia? Two things. One of them on the siting that we found out, so many of these deals naturally and historically are governed by NDAs. And for people at the local level, that just creates this area of uncertainty. And even some of the data center developers I've talked to have acknowledged that. And so while NDAs are a very common part of business transactions, they've also helped create a little bit of the suspicion locally. So I think we're going to see either by law or just by practice, more transparency about who it is so that they can come in and tell their story without this mystery behind the NDA. Secondly, I'd be remiss without noting that data center rate design, if done right, can pay more of the fixed costs of other ratepayers. And we know we're going to see it already in Indiana. We've had one of our investor owns already announced that they'll be filing a petition to reduce their base rates this summer because of the revenue from data center customers paying more of the fixed costs that would otherwise be paid by residential ratepayers. And that's happy news for everyone going in and asking for your rates to be reduced, your base rates to be reduced. So if done right, this can be very, very beneficial to residential ratepayers, as we're going to see in one example here in Indiana.
I've seen when you mentioned NDAs, the use of NDAs. I've seen some states, at least 6 or so, have introduced like limiting or banning the use for data centers. Are you familiar with any legislation in Indiana off the top of your head?
We talked about it. We've talked seriously about it, and so we're hoping that it won't take legislation, but it may. And so I think that's very important at the local level. And the other thing, let me say here in Indiana, we're not going to build for speculators, and there are all kinds of people filing these petitions and through legislation passed here recently that they're going to need what we've called a parent company guarantee, but it's actually going to be someone with the wherewithal to follow through because there is a lot of speculation going on in this space. And so we're not going to build power plants for speculators here in Indiana.
And I know some states have required like fees for just putting in a bid to try to control that, but we're dealing with, I guess, some of the richest companies that have ever existed, so they might just think that's the price of doing business. Which takes me to Representative Dolio. I wanted to talk to you about how your bill was the target of serious lobbying by major corporations like Microsoft and Amazon. It died this year. What do you think your chances are next year, and how can you get it a little further, or do you think you could get it across the finish line? I assume Microsoft and Amazon will come back with all their army of lobbying to try to head you off.
Yes, I'm hoping that we'll be working together actually to move a bill forward as opposed to working on opposite ends. I think Microsoft and Amazon have been actually very good players in many ways in Washington State. Although I will say that on the NDA side, Amazon had been sort of working in Walla Walla County, a rural community, and was under an NDA. The community didn't know what was going on, and then during the course of session, it actually did come out that they were looking at a 16 campus site in Walla Walla, which was the source of that secretive work that was going on in that community. I actually have found that the transparency issue is a very challenging issue. No one in the country has passed any kind of legislation requiring transparency. It sounds like Delegate Thomas that you made a little bit of headway in that space, but I found that to be a really, really hard thing. So many constituents are concerned about water, and they say we're doing all these closed loop systems. We're not using that much water, especially when you compare us to ag operations. And I'm like, great, let us know. Tell us, like, if that is the case, I think it is in their best interest to let us know what kind of water they're using, because in our state, it's very challenging because it's all locally based water rights, or a lot of it is, not all of it. Some of it's state-based, some of it's local, but a complicated web of water rights. So I feel like, we got a long way this past session. It made it to the other body, to the Financial Committee. It didn't quite make it to the Senate floor. And so I feel like we will be working closely with our building trades folks, as well as the data centers and conservationists who are concerned about this issue, to try and pass something next year. But I feel confident we will make more progress next year. And like I did mention, we did roll back those. So we had a sales tax exemption when they build, and then for refresh, they got another sales tax exemption, which happens every 3 to 5 years. And we rolled back that refresh tax incentive. So there was some action, whether you feel that's good or bad. It certainly is helpful to our state budget for that reason. But that's sort of where things sit right now.
And that refresh, please.
I think it's important to note, technology is moving rapidly. And I found in my years of public service in the private sector as well, it's important not to make long-term policy around today's technology. And I think on the positive side, we are seeing technology evolve, data center technology that uses less water and uses less electricity. And it's, technology can solve problems created by technology. So I think we need to be mindful of the fact that research is going on, and just as we saw the efficiency of, let's say, wind turbines improve, solar panels improved, we are seeing data center technology improve to use less water and electricity. We don't know what that's going to look like, 5 or 10 years from now. So as we make policy, I think we always need to be flexible and be mindful of that, not set something into stone on the long-term basis where technology could change something on a dime.
Right, absolutely. Senator Cook, I wanted to ask you about nuclear power, and some folks are wary of nuclear power. I mean, there's the issue of waste, and there's a residual concern over accidents like Fukushima and Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island. What do you say to folks to allay these fears, and how has it been an obstacle for you to get more of your framework into law?
The first thing I would say is go visit a nuclear power plant. I've been at several, and I think you start there. Indiana had quite a history with nuclear, and it really, as you suggest, it was hard to even talk about it in Indiana for a generation or two, because going back to the early 80s, a plant under construction called Marble Hill was a financial debacle. And anyone of this age, that name, Marble Hill, triggers financial questions about nuclear. And then you had 3 Mile Island, as you said, Fukushima, and Chernobyl kind of in the interim, creating science concerns. We know today, particularly with SMRs, that they fail passively. So the kind of events you've seen in these other examples, you're not going to see with an SMR. And I've had several friends on the nuclear Navy on submarines and ships told me their bunks were right on the other side of the wall from the nuclear power, and very used to it. And so other states have done it successfully. Other countries are doing it successfully. And our safety standards are top of the line. And as with anything, let's just start with our cell phone, the cost goes down with scale. And the financial risk of building an SMR is certainly much less than a traditional, like a Vogtle nuclear power plant. Financial risk is less. So I think now's the time. All of those things have come together, and even some of my friends on the environmental left, they're divided on nuclear power because of the cleanliness, and so I think now is the time, and certainly Indiana's positioned ourselves for the future and to be welcoming of that, and to help supply this need for generation that we all acknowledge is on the way. But it took some time, and it was not a something that too many political leaders in Indiana were talking about, really, until just a few years ago. And it does have bipartisan support, here in Indiana, and a lot of support out in our communities. People are learning more about it. And again, through SMRs, those kind of risks can greatly be mitigated.
Gotcha. Representative Klopfenstein, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you. I wanted to ask you, you helped pass a massive energy bill last year, HB 15, that is designed to make it easier to build more generation. Could you give us an overview of power generation in Ohio, and why do we need more, and how has that demand changed during your time in office?
Well, I guess the place to start is I've been in about 3.5 years and didn't get an opportunity. We have a 2-year term to work on it much the first 2 years. We had a change in leadership, and certainly the will to change policies probably as big as changing the policy. But a lot of people come to the table, and we were able to sort of have some good advice of where we wanted to go. And Ohio, not that many years ago, was a power exporter. And somehow through the closing of coal plants, we had lost that sort of competitive advantage. And seeing what was coming down the road with reshoring and the data centers, I believe in Ohio now we're up to about 200 data centers, mostly in central Ohio, more coming. But smarter people than me, but we worked on it together, saw the advantage of doing the behind the meter power plant building. And it has ignited a host of projects, a massive project last week, a big press release prior to that through President Trump. But we lowered some very substantial tax rates and try to streamline the bureaucracy, shorter time frames to get the permits, and we literally tried to make it business generation friendly. Come to Ohio, we want you here. Certainly, we want distributive power if we can get it. So we have to build less transmission initially. It takes just as long to build a big transmission project as it does a power plant. So if we can get the power plants out in the area where the power is or close. The behind the meter has facilitated that also. So cutting of tax rates and cutting of bureaucracy to get the job done is two huge factors.
That's really interesting. And the behind the meter stuff, I read about that in Ohio. Did you guys get some pushback from the utilities? Because that seems like money out of their pocket. Is that going to be a big part of the equation? And do you see them going along with it?
Um, yes, they are. We're not happy with us. I'm probably not all on their Christmas card list, but that's okay. Um, Ohio has a deregulated generation and then regulated transmission and distribution. So, um, part of House Bill 15, it made it very clear that we didn't want the EDUs to be in the generation business. Certainly, they would like to be. We just think that as a competitive market is better for the consumer. Um, the change in the legislature, the utilities, and I wasn't there, but what I'm told, the utilities have had their way for quite a few years. And now we're in a position where having their way has not won them many friends, and our consumers are paying a lot higher rates than we think they need to be. But part of that is federal policy that trickles down. And I can't remember how many coal plants have shut and coal plants that have shut prematurely. And we have an incredible amount of natural gas here. So we're ready to go. But no, the utilities are not happy with us. We made it very clear. I mean, it was sort of a unique time, I think, in the fact that it was bipartisan. And the chairman of the House Energy Committee made it very clear that it's going to be open discussion because of what had happened in the past. Everybody was at the table. Certainly, we didn't have 100% agreement in everything, but we told the utilities, you're part of the solution. We want you at the table and we're going to discuss, but you're not driving the boat. And there might have been some kicking and screaming, but we got through that. And I think we have some additional things we want to clean up yet and make it even better. But we can't bring, at least in Ohio, we can't get new generation online quick enough. And certainly this is part of the solution. I heard just a little talk on the SMRs. Depending on your sources, how quick they're getting here. I would love to have somebody say, "Hey, we've got one that is has a hard date for a start." We haven't gotten anything like that yet, but we know there is going to be nuclear expansion in Ohio.
All right, great. I think we're gonna take some questions. Am I right, folks?
Yep. All right. We got a couple of questions from the audience here. First of all, thank you to all four of our guests for being here today. First question comes from Michael. Has there been any effort in any of your states to talk about electric infrastructure at the same as water or wastewater infrastructure? The water conversation around data centers tends to be about the commodity and neglects the infrastructure component of it.
Yeah, I can start with that, Reed. Like everybody else, we've got a grid that's 100 years old. And so a lot of the rise in rates has been driven by repairing and upgrading the grid, and let alone building it out. And so as we have seen rates rise, that's been here one of the drivers. We're promoting two things. One, this year through Senate Rolled Act 422, advanced transmission technology, or excuse me, that was last year, advanced transmission technologies, which are ways to upgrade, and Ripton Kloffenstein mentioned transmission and the cost. So through ATTs, advanced transmission technologies, you can upgrade existing lines without having to bid new. So we've passed legislation promoting that. And then this year through Senate Rolled Act 240, we're promoting what's called surplus interconnection service. And that is using the unused interconnection service at interconnection points, that unused capacity, rather than building new. So we put both incentives in place, and we've asked our Utility Regulatory Commission to study those and make recommendations. So we're really encouraging utilities before building new let's look at what we've got. And there are ways that we can upgrade that at a lower cost to consumers.
Delegate Thomas, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so you can see from this last session, and honestly for the past 3 sessions, I would say there's always been a bill every year about grid enhancement technology and incentivizing that. I think initially, if you were to look 3 years ago, you can call it the environmentalist factions and say the utility and industry were probably this far apart. I would say this year is the closest we've gotten, and there was a bill that I think is still churning its way to the governor. Where that is still alive, which is good because I mean on the one hand, again back to those buckets, who's going to pay for it, and that's always a big question. Now I will give the industry a little credit in that they have been a lot more collegial this year in being willing to take that cost on with the understanding that it actually or decreases the amount that they're paying in the long term because of the efficiency of the grid. So that's kind of where Virginia is and trying to figure out both a public-private partnership approach to incentivizing grid enhancement technology.
All right.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in on that if I could. We did pass a bill that is on the governor's desk right now, 6355, which creates a Washington Transmission Authority. So in the West, we do not have a regional transmission organization. We are a very unorganized grid. We are making a lot of progress in working towards a regional transmission authority organization. And many of our states, Wyoming, Idaho, Colorado, New Mexico, and North Dakota have created these state transmission authorities because unfortunately in Washington, BPA, which is owns about 75% of our transmission, has only connected 1 in 469 clean energy projects to the grid. So we have a very significant problem here. I'm excited that we made some progress this year with a bill on the governor's desk right now. Also, we didn't quite get over the hump with the we would sort of reduce regulatory. We have a state environmental policy act. We would have a categorical exemption for grid enhancement technologies, reconductoring, that sort of thing. That did not get across the finish line. There's a significant amount of tribal opposition to that in our state. But we did get the transmission authority across, and excited to see how that plays out in the next decade or so.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I guess we also had in House Bill 15 that they had to start looking at the enhanced transmission technologies. And what seems logical to consumers when you explain to them that you can use the same right of way and in some cases double the capacity with relining it. We still, in my opinion, have gotten pushback from the utilities because they would make more money if they literally build a whole new line. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're going to have to get a little more forceful and probably pass some legislation that is going to force the utilities to take maybe a longer term view and maybe put the customers a little quicker over profits and say, hey, use the same right away. It's quicker. The wire's more expensive, but the capacity is so much more.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question here from a fellow state lawmaker, State Representative Boomer Wright from Oregon. How did you prepare your constituents with information to get support for data centers, for SMRs, or for nuclear plants? Anybody want to tackle that one?
Well, I'll kick it off. I mean, back to transparency, talking about it and talking in public forums about it. And for those of us who carried the bills hours at the microphone, subject to a lot of cross-examination and committee work, and trying to bring in as many stakeholders as possible and finding common ground, at least maybe part of what we're trying to do. And it was mentioned earlier, the building trades here in Indiana, have been great partners in driving this conversation. So part of us just being able to talk about it and presenting facts, and hopefully people will hear that, use their best judgment, and make their own conclusions. And I think today, with the access to information we have through the internet, I mean, people are able to do a lot more homework than they were 30 years ago on many of these issues from their office or their living room. And so there's a lot of information out there. Unfortunately, as we know, a lot of misinformation out there on these topics, but I think it's being as transparent as possible in what we do.
It's been very difficult to get ahead of the misinformation. We do try to be transparent, do try to explain it to people. I don't know that Ohio has a corner in the market of NIMBYs, but we have our fair share, and you just go out and try to explain it. We got a pretty abundant supply of water. Not that we want to mismanage it in any way, but the misinformation has been, in my opinion, a struggle on the whole thing. And just explain to people, whether you like data centers or not, they are a quality of life issue, and they're here to stay till the next best thing comes.
Gotcha.
I'll say for Virginia, so I was elected specifically for like one of three reasons, and one of those reasons was to hold the data center industry accountable. I mean, the polling is incredibly lopsided, and the results in elections are incredibly lopsided. I mean, if you're in Western Prince William or Southern Loudoun and you say, I love the data center industry, or take data center industry money, you're not getting elected. And that is reflective of the way that people feel about it now. But I would say that at the end of the day, how do you sell, whether you come at from my side or whether you come at from some of my colleagues' sides on the call, like, you still got to meet in the middle, right? And so if you have your people over here, you still got to be able to convince them that what we've arrived at the middle, like this bill that's going to the governor's desk in Virginia, it's not what I wanted, it's not what most of my constituents wanted, but at the end of the day, we were able to compromise and come up with something that will help solve part of the problem. And though each side might disagree about what the problem really is and what the solution certainly is, it shows that compromise is possible even on something that is a hot button issue right now, like data centers.
In terms of SMRs and nuclear power, I mean, Boomer, right? You and I share, a border where we have had very mixed results with nuclear power. Columbia Generating Station in the Tri-Cities does continue to operate 1.2 1.2 gigawatts of power for our state, and but we are still paying for the whoops. Which was literally the name of it, coincidentally, WPPSS. We're still paying for that in our rates right now in terms of the towers that were built and never used because of the cost. Amazon is investing in SMRs. The state has invested with our Climate Commitment Act dollars, our cap and trade program, in an SMR for Energy Northwest, which is the operating body for the Columbia Generating Station. And honestly, I would say in terms of building support for nuclear, there is a member from the Tri-Cities who started a nuclear caucus and has regular meetings, bringing in experts on nuclear energy all during session and doing site visits. She has just made it her mission. That is, what makes her community sing, and has all the economic development going on. And so she's made it her mission. And I think that's built a lot of support within the legislature on both sides of the aisle for nuclear power.
Gotcha. So we've talked a lot about these sort of specific issues in the energy space, data centers, nuclear, the emerging SMR technology. I want to sort of finish by taking a step back here. As we think about all of these issues piling up, how concerned are you that your states are just going to run out of supply, given sort of the ever increasing demand, the ever increasing costs on consumers? What's the bigger picture here? Are we going to have enough electricity in the years going forward?
Well, I'll begin. Indiana is a vertically integrated, regulated state, and so we have 5 investor-owned utilities who will file every 3 years an integrated resource plan that's a 20-year look ahead. So we are constantly looking at those and being proactive, and that served us well. And so I think we've been going through what we've called a managed transition of energy, and so I think through looking at the integrated resource plans that are filed, I feel good, and steps that we have taken to ensure that that's going to be there. Most of Indiana is in MISO. We've got part of northern Indiana in PJM, and that's probably a topic for another webinar another day. the RTOs, but we see value in those memberships in terms of our adequacy of supply, in addition to the new generation that we own in our building.
Yeah, that RTO would be super helpful in the West. So it's nice to hear that you enjoy being part of both. I didn't realize that Indiana was split in that way. I am incredibly concerned. We have had this year, I am very concerned about this summer. We have had very little snow. It's 20 degrees hotter here on the West Coast than it should be at this time. So all of that snow is melting now, what little of it there is. So that is going to really impact our hydropower supply, which is what we have really thrived on. We have abundant hydropower, clean hydropower, which we are not going to have as much of this year because of the water supply. And then it will also really put at stake our fire season, which is just a regular thing that we are dealing with because of climate change, and super, super concerned about our fire season this year. So I feel like we are at a precipice, and that we need to proceed very carefully. Nuclear power is an option, but it's like 10 years off. Also, I see states, really investing heavily in gas and also these data centers. And again, that just continues to stoke the climate crisis that we are in. So I mean, it's exciting, and it's in a challenging time to be a policymaker that's focused on energy issues. But it's a scary time, and I don't see a clear path to how we make sure we keep the lights on and the heat and cooling on for our ratepayers and our constituents, while at the same time being able to build out massive amounts of energy for data centers. The good thing is that they have a lot of money, and so they're able to invest in new technologies that RIOUs are not able to put the dollars into nuclear power because of the cost. It is not in their IRPs. But Amazon is, and they can sort of say, we want to build an SMR, and here's, money to start doing that. So I think it's an exciting time and also a very scary time.
Yeah, I'll say that in Virginia, and if you haven't taken a look at this, I encourage folks to. So like all states, we have an equivalent to the Congressional Budget Office, if you will, legislative arm that does research, and it's called JLARC, JLARC. If you Google JLARC Data Centers Virginia, you'll get the report. And in that report, they made it very clear that unless Virginia does something either on the demand side or on the generation side, our ability to meet our energy needs in 10, 20 years' time is going to be our two options will be difficult or very difficult, which is not normally the words that group chooses to describe things that in such a dire manner. And by way of example, to associate my comments with Beth, is that, this last summer, we had a demand response issue where PJM said, hey, everything's too hot, 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the summer, and we need an undisclosed data center to fire up your generators beyond just the monthly test, but to actually get you off the grid for a small period of time. And so that opens up, okay, now we got to talk about generator efficiency and things like that. If demand response is going to be the Band-Aid in between the generation solution that we try to come up with. So I can tell you here in Virginia, it's very tough. I think for PJM, it's tough in general. We only have one true net exporter of power, and that's Pennsylvania. But they just inked a deal for their own data center campus coming to a spot near a locality near them. And so if they start following the way of some other states, they probably won't be an exporter anymore. And now PJM is going to have some very difficult decisions to make. So we're all related to this one way or the other across the country. So it's great that we pull together in forums like this and talk about what works and what doesn't, and what we can do to solve the generation and demand issue.
All right, Representative Coffenstein, I'll give you the last word.
When I look at it, yes, we have some concerns. We've tried to address those concerns with the quicker online behind the meter, take those users off the main grid. We've used demand response in industry for years to lower the peak, and we're trying to get everyone else on board. The technology that is available with demand response, I think, is the answer for the next 3 to 5 years till we get new generation online. The commercials all use demand response. They get lower rates to shut down. It frustrates me when the media says the coming blackouts. My argument is we already have blackouts. We just manage them by shutting the commercials down. So if we can get that on the residential side, incredible technology will get us through this on the demand response. But we have to get that sold to the consumers and change some habits. But it's very possible, and we will get there. But it's just a matter of managing what power we have till we get the new base load on the line.
All right, that is going to wrap up our town hall spotlight on energy for the day. My big thanks to Representative Beth Dolio from Washington, Senator Eric Cook from Indiana, Delegate Josh Thomas from Virginia, and Representative Roy Kloppenstein from Ohio, and to my colleague Humberto Sanchez for hosting today. Please don't miss our stories on the energy landscape in legislatures today. You can find that link in the comments. I put it in there about 20 minutes ago. And my thanks to all of you for joining us today. Be on the lookout for more of these town hall events as we spotlight the big issues facing lawmakers today. So thanks to all of you. I really appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.